So now we're going to get into today's presentation. As I stated previously, the focus of today is on job functions and distinguishing the difference between essential and marginal. Today's presenters are myself and my colleague Erin Metz. We are both accessibility specialists within the Disability Equity Office. Before we get into content, we do want to give some Zoom webinar tips. This workshop is being recorded and will be made available on ECRT's YouTube channel as soon as possible. The slides for this presentation will also be emailed out to all registered participants, and there's also going to be an anonymous survey that comes with that. We do really hope that you'll complete the short survey, as this helps us determine how we can best assist you with your learning goals. On this slide, the Zoom webinar tips include using the Q&A feature to submit your questions that you may have throughout. ASL, American Sign Language, interpretation can also be utilized by clicking on the interpretation button and selecting American Sign Language. And then lastly, CART transcription can be turned on by selecting show captions in that Zoom toolbar. On today's agenda, we want to talk about how the University of Michigan is committed to fostering an inclusive environment where accessibility and the needs of individuals with disabilities are prioritized, ensuring equitable opportunities for all members of our diverse community. So in our workshop today, we're going to cover what are job functions, what are job descriptions, what do they include, the difference between those essential and marginal job functions. And then we're going to have some case studies, both from the Job Accommodation Network regarding job description scenarios and some job function case scenarios talking about the difference between our essential and marginal job functions. At the end, we'll also have just some resources and services available that are offered through our office, again, the Disability Equity Office. And we also want to encourage everybody attending to please engage. Questions are encouraged. Again, use that Q&A feature. If you're thinking about it, there's a very good chance somebody else has the same question as you. We want to model a brave and safe space and respect the experience of others. This is an opportunity for growth and learning, and everybody here is going to be learning together. So now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Erin as she gets into our first topic of today's presentation.
Good morning, everyone. This is Erin speaking. So let's get started talking about job functions. What are they? Well, a job function is the set of activities or tasks that an individual completes as part of their position's responsibilities within the organization. So these functions include our daily duties, as well as the occasional project that an employee might have. Job functions explain specifically what an individual does for their job within the organization or here at the university. And why are job functions so important? Well, they clarify job listings and help to define job titles. So when a job function accompanies a job description, when an open position is posted online, that makes it so prospective employees can understand those job duties before they decide to apply. They also help establish job competencies. So listing those competencies helps organize the information, both for the employees and the employers, so we can learn exactly what expertise is needed. They also help describe primary job duties and can be used internally to give employees direction as to the daily work responsibilities. And job functions act as an accountability tool. So for employers, this helps us be able to describe those job functions when conducting evaluations, but for employees, it can also be used as a form of self-reflection. So we're going to take just a very brief moment to look at this chart here for essential versus marginal job functions, and we'll go into much more detail later on in the presentation. But we want to talk first about the three key considerations. The first being the percentage of time that is spent on a task. For a function to be considered essential, it's typically a significant percent of time, sometimes listed as 20% or more, spent on a given task. Whereas if it was marginal, it's generally less than 10% of the time spent on that same task. The second consideration is the frequency of the task. For essential functions, these are tasks that are performed regularly, which could be daily, weekly, or monthly. Whereas marginal functions are performed infrequently or even when substituting in part of another job. And the third consideration is the importance of that task. So for essential functions, these are fundamental components of the job. Whereas if they're marginal, they're less critical, that are not essential to the purpose of the position. Now you'll see on those first two considerations an asterisk. So we want to keep in mind that time and frequency are not sole considerations in determining essential versus marginal functions. And an example of this could be a firefighter who maybe on occasion needs to carry a 200 plus pound person out of a burning building. So this may not be something that happens frequently, and it could be very, very rare, but it is still an essential function of the position. So again, we're going to go into more detail on this in a bit later in the presentation. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about job descriptions. So job descriptions summarize the essential responsibilities, activities, qualifications, or necessary skills for a role. Often we're going to refer to this as the JD. This type of document describes the work that is performed. When we have an effective job description, it should be providing enough details for candidates or employees to determine whether or not they're qualified for their position. Some other important details that could be included on a job description, perhaps the university's mission, any kind of benefits that are provided to employees. It can specify who the position reports to, so having that ladder there, and also the salary. According to an Indeed survey, 52% of job seekers say the quality of the job description and its detail is either very or extremely influential on their decision to apply for that specific job. So let's talk about the 6 major components of these JDs. Obviously, number 1, listing those essential job functions. Number 2, putting in the knowledge and critical skills necessary for the position. Number 3, listing any physical demands, like if you need to move or transport items. Number 4, any environmental factors, maybe if you need to work outdoors or in places with varying temperatures. Number 5, the role of the ADA and any other federal laws that may apply to the position. So for example, someone working in food safety or someone who might be working under the Fair Housing Act or any other necessary laws. And number 6, any other information that might be necessary to help clarify job duties, responsibilities, or skills. Under the ADA, only qualified employees may seek reasonable accommodations. So this is one of the reasons why it's so important that we're maintaining updated job descriptions. And in creating those job descriptions, we really need to consider the ADA when we're determining the requirements or qualifications necessary for that position. So in this example, we're talking about applicants who are able to perform all of the job requirements. That means that those individuals are qualified for the position, and if they have a disability, it should not affect any employment decision. Whereas if an applicant is unable to perform the essential functions of the role, they should not be considered for the position because they must be qualified to perform those essential functions, either with or without accommodation. So one of the things you'll hear people from our office say a lot is we can best understand if a candidate or an employee is qualified for their position by asking the question, can you perform the essential functions of this position with or without accommodation? If the answer to that question is yes, they are generally going to be considered qualified. So now let's talk about how to write a job description. So this is pretty straightforward, as most of us have seen job descriptions in the past, and we should all have one as well. The first piece is the job title. We, of course, should make that job title specific so we can understand what the position is just by reading the title. We can keep our language clear and simple, describing responsibilities or any needs of the position in plain English. So steering clear of complicated language and jargon that might be confusing. We can also include a summary of the job, which may have an overview of whether it's the university or the individual department, but include expectations for that position. We can include details of what makes the organization or this position unique, and also include an exact job location. So, for example, here at the University of Michigan, we have several campuses. We should want to include which campus this position might be located. We also want to include the responsibilities and duties of the position. So, outlining those core responsibilities or those essential job functions. We can do so by highlighting some of the day to day activities and specify how the position fits into the organization. So, perhaps sharing information about who someone might be working with or being responsible for. Also, listing the qualifications and skills. So, specifying exactly what is needed, whether it's a list of hard skills or soft skills, but also making sure we're keeping that list concise and important and relevant to the position. We can also include growth opportunities. So, if there are chances for internal development or advancement, and any benefits like PTO, flexible schedules, medical and dental coverage, things of that nature. So, all of these items will be included in an effective job description. If you are looking for help writing an effective job description or updating current job descriptions, you can chat with the University of Michigan Talent Acquisition Team, who really focus on supporting inclusive skills based hiring. So they have specific resources for hiring departments, including a lot of best practices to use in that hiring process. And they help to focus on supporting the university and providing service in various ways, like full cycle recruiting for priority hiring. They actually help with consulting and training quite a bit, and also help lead self-guided hiring processes. Over to you, Lauren.
This is Lauren speaking. So now I'm going to talk to you more specifically about those essential job functions and the differences between those and marginal job functions. So what exactly is an essential job function? There are some factors that help determine whether a job function is essential or marginal. So some things that we want to consider are whether the position exists specifically to perform these essential functions. One question we might want to ask ourselves is, would this position still exist if it didn't perform this function? The number of other employees who are available to perform the same job duties. You can ask yourselves, do we have other employees who are available who can or already do perform this function? And then the expertise or skills that are required to perform the essential functions. So, is this function highly specialized? Does it require that an employee have specific skill sets, licensure, or certification in order to perform it? And then, as Aaron talked about in that previous chart, considering how much time is spent performing the function and how much weight does it carry for the role. On the right of this page, we have an image that says who qualifies for ADA accommodations. Aaron spoke to that a little bit, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more on the next slide too. And it really emphasizes these essential job functions. So the role of essential job functions with accommodations, according to the Americans with Disabilities Act, or otherwise known as the ADA, an applicant or employee must be able to perform the essential job functions. Essential job functions are those job duties that are fundamental to the position. They are the reason that that job exists. The Job Accommodation Network, otherwise known as JAN, states that essential functions are those job duties that an employee must be able to perform, as Aaron stated earlier, with or without a reasonable accommodation. So now that we've defined what an essential job function is, we've talked about some of the differences between that and a marginal. This is a tangible example that somebody provided me before that I thought was very helpful in grasping this concept and really being able to differentiate the differences between these job functions. So we want to think of the scaffolding of a home, and we're going to compare that to a job description and job functions. So when we're thinking of the scaffolding, those essential job functions are things like the foundation, the joists, the subfloor, the studs, things that make that home the home. That again, if we removed them, it would fundamentally alter. So questions to ask yourself when using this tangible example are, would this home still exist if this element didn't exist to perform its function? If we remove those studs or the foundation? Are there other elements within this home that can or do perform this function already? And then would the home be fundamentally altered if this element didn't exist? We're now going to transition into marginal job functions, and we're going to carry that tangible example over into this as well to see the difference. But first, we're going to define what is a marginal job function. The Northeast ADA Center defines it as a job-related task that is not an essential aspect of the job. Because this task is non-essential, it could be removed from an employee's responsibilities if the employee were unable to perform that task due to a disability. When assessing and identifying workplace accommodation options for employees, removing a marginal function can be considered a reasonable accommodation. So, for example, consider a person who works as a housekeeper at a hotel. In this example, the person is able to walk well, but they're not able to ascend and descend going up and down those stairs. So, if a small or marginal part of their job is to clean the stairwell within the hotel employer could reassign that job responsibility to another housekeeping staff member as a reasonable accommodation. Essential functions of a job can also be removed temporarily as part of a reasonable accommodation to allow an employee time to maybe heal to their previous status of function. An example of this could be if there's a temporary impairment, such as a broken leg, or while they're exploring alternative accommodation options as a means for keeping the individual employed while situating a more ongoing reasonable accommodation. So now that we've defined both essential and marginal, we're going to transition back to the scaffolding example, but look at it from the perspective of the marginal function. So when thinking of what would be marginal maybe within that home, we want to think of items like decorative pieces, curtains, plants, pictures on the wall, maybe a throw blanket or pillow. So comparing the scaffolding, would the home still exist if these decorative elements didn't exist to perform their function? And the answer would be yeah. The same way that houses get staged when they're being listed, people remove these items when they're moving, the house no longer has them, but those fundamental foundational elements still exist, keeping that home a home. Are there other decorative elements that can or do perform this function? Yes. Think of the homes that we all live in. Everybody decorates them differently. We can remove them. Some people prioritize having plants or pictures or decorations. They all look different and we all have different elements within our own. And then lastly, would the home be fundamentally altered if this element did not exist? And no, we can remove those, we can change them, styles change, different things are kind of modified throughout, but they're not those fundamental pieces like that foundation, those studs and those joists. So our scaffolding of our home is our example on kind of helping to determine what is marginal versus essential. And now that we've gone through examples of each of these, we want to do an interactive case study with each of you to kind of practice through varying scenarios on what's essential versus marginal. So in our first scenario, this is presented by Jan, again, that job accommodation network, and it's regarding job descriptions. So a large employer was in the process of updating job descriptions to be accurate and fair to ensure that candidates with disabilities who might otherwise be qualified and able to perform job duties were not excluded. The employer sought guidance from Jan about how to describe the job tasks. It was explained that it can be useful to describe the desired outcome of work rather than one method for accomplishing that outcome.
This is Erin speaking. So now we're going to launch a poll, which hopefully is popping up on your screens now. So in this poll, you're going to select which statement you feel like is the most inclusive. Is it the first, lifts beverage cases from delivery truck into store? Or the second option, moves beverage cases weighing up to 50 pounds from delivery truck into store? And we'll give you just a moment to select your answer. Okay, it looks like our results are overwhelmingly correct. So the rationale here is that the task itself is to move the product from point A to point B, not just to lift it. And there can be more than one method for moving something. So your answer here is correct. It is the second option. So in this example, pushing the product from the lift gate to the truck, lowering it to ground level, and then using a hand truck to move it could be a way of performing that task. So that second statement is the most inclusive because not only does it describe the desired outcome rather than how the task should be performed, it also provides some detail about the weight of the items that need to be moved. So in this situation, the job description can be a useful tool for describing the desired outcome of that task.
And this is Lauren speaking. We're now on our second job description scenario. So let me give some background like I did in the last one for this situation. An employer drafted a job description for the position of an administrative assistant that works in multiple buildings across campus. That included the requirement that employees in this title must possess a valid driver's license. A candidate for the position had a visual limitation and did not have or need a driver's license because she used public transportation. Driving was not an essential function of the position, but the employer included the requirement to ensure applicants were able to get to multiple work sites throughout the day across campus.
Right, this is Erin speaking again. So here is our second poll. And this is going to allow you to select all of the answers that could apply. What alternatives may exist to allow an employee to get to multiple work buildings? And our options are public transportation, rideshare, bicycle, a personal transportation method, which could include walking, use of a scooter or a mobility device, a campus bus system. Is it all of the above, or is it none of the above? All right, it looks like we've got most of our answers in again, and you all are on it today. So the answer is correct. All of these could be potential options. So an employee with a disability who does not drive can access any alternative option to commute to work or across various campus buildings. So for this particular position, the driver's license isn't necessary to perform the essential job duties because they can use any option to traverse from one building to another. So qualification standards in the job description should distinguish between the need or perhaps the convenience of having that driver's license and consider any discriminatory effects that could be in that language.
And this is Lauren speaking. We're going to transition now over to a case study. And so I want to first note before we get into this that all accommodations are assessed on an individualized case-by-case basis through the interactive process in conversation with the employee and their unit. So for the purpose of this training, these case studies are simply examples. In this first example, the position of this employee is an office manager. Their diagnosis is migraines, and the limitations corresponding with that are thinking, seeing, and concentrating. This employee has disclosed that these are due to light sensitivity and that exacerbates their symptoms. The job functions of this position are greeting visitors, opening and closing the office, watering plants in the office, maintaining and cleaning the fridge, doing office supply inventory, answering phone and email inquiries, scheduling appointments, checking the mail, and arranging conference room furniture for meetings. This individual has requested the following accommodation. They want to be able to work fully remote because the employee reported having more control over their environment at home, which helps to mitigate the symptoms that they're experiencing due to that light sensitivity. So for this example, during the interactive process meetings, the accessibility specialist explained the limitations this employee was experiencing, but not the employee's condition. They didn't disclose what that diagnosis was to the unit or department. Also for this example, I'm going to share some background information to help with the upcoming polls. So discussing light sensitivity is something that wouldn't be shared in a unit meeting, but it was provided by the employee for the learning purpose of this training content. So, in conversations in the interactive process, it was determined that the individual was one of three people performing under the same job title in the department, meaning there were two other people who could assist with many of the tasks above. With that background information, I'll give it back over to Erin for our next poll.
All right, so this is Erin speaking. We have a multi-part questionnaire here for this poll. So keeping the scaffolding example that Lauren went over in mind, and based on what you may know about an office manager position. First question, select all that apply. Which job functions are likely to be considered essential to this role, meaning that their removal would fundamentally alter the job? So again, this is a select all that apply, greeting visitors, opening and closing the office, watering plants in the office, maintaining or cleaning out the fridge, office supply inventory, answering the phones and email inquiries, scheduling appointments, checking the mail, arranging conference room furniture for meetings. So I'll give everyone a moment to work on the first part of this question before we start on the second. So which of the following job functions may be considered essential for a person working as an office manager? Okay, as I see most of you have put your responses in, we'll also move on to the second part of the question. Does the employee's accommodation request to work fully remote seem reasonable given the information that we have available to us? And this is a simple yes or no answer. And the third part of our question, which alternative accommodation options could provide this employee equally effective support? So if they're unable to work remotely, so coming into the office, could they use light filters or dimmers, use a hybrid or a flexible work schedule, consider workspace modifications to allow more control over the lighting? Is it all of these? Is it that only the employee's specific request is reasonable? Or perhaps is it none of these answers? Okay, it looks like most of our answers are in. So we'll go over each parts of this question individually. So the first question, which job functions are essential? So keeping in mind that this would require an interactive process to go through all of this information, what was determined is that inventory, answering the phone, and scheduling email appointments are those essential functions, which means if we take those job duties away, we have fundamentally altered this office manager position. So greeting visitors, not necessarily an essential function because the other members in the office can do this as well. There can also be a sign on the door that says, "Welcome to our office." As far as our second part of the question, does the accommodation request seem reasonable? So on its face, given the information that the employee shared about how their symptoms manifest at work and cause some of those limitations, yes, this accommodation request could seem reasonable. The employee would ask to work fully remote because they have more control over their environment at home, mitigating their symptoms. But again, we would still need to determine reasonableness through the interactive process. This is just an example. And lastly, which alternative accommodation options could provide support? It's all of them. So while the employee's original request may still be reasonable, it's unlikely to be the only reasonable option. So great work on your questionnaire there. And we've got one more case study for you.
All right, our last case study, this is similar to the last one where I'm going to give you background information first. The position for this example is a security officer. The employee reported that they have a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, and the corresponding limitations are sitting, standing, walking, lifting, and concentration. The job functions for their role include routine foot patrol of specific areas, radio communications, monitoring surveillance cameras, responding to emergencies, escorting visitors, ensuring compliance with regulations, completing shift logs, and providing directions to visitors. This individual has requested the following accommodations: additional breaks for resting and taking medication, which includes a modified schedule, so splitting their shifts with 90 minutes between. For a little bit of extra context, in addition to this, there are 5 other security officers who also work at the same time as this individual, one of which rotates through the building to give other security officers either backup or breaks. And now I'll hand it back over to Erin for our last poll in this presentation.
All right, so this is Erin speaking. We'll go ahead and launch this next poll. It's the same format as our previous. So the first question is, selecting all that apply, which of the following job functions are likely to be considered essential? So remember, these are the job functions that should be listed in the job description. And they are the functions that if we remove them, it's fundamentally altering how this role is completed. So routine foot patrol, radio communications, monitoring surveillance cameras, responding to emergencies, escorting visitors, ensuring compliance, completing shift logs, providing directions. Which of these are likely to be considered essential to the security officer role? Okay, you guys are answering this one really fast. All right, the second part of our question: does this accommodation request to allow for additional breaks and potentially modifying the work schedule seem reasonable on its face? So given what the information that the employee has shared about their condition and how it could be impacting them, does the request seem like it makes sense, or is it reasonable? And the third part of our question: which of these alternative accommodation options may be equally effective? Allowing the employee to use mobility aids, using additional staff to provide coverage while this employee is taking a break, reassigning essential job duties to other staff, all of the above? Or is it that only the employee's original request is reasonable, or none of the above? Right, it seems like most of you have your answers in, so we'll go ahead and end this poll and go over our responses. So as the first part of the question, which of the following functions are essential? Really, this is most of them. So if we think about security officers and what they need to do, perhaps completing the shift log may not be essential if maybe the supervisor completes the shift log. Or providing directions to visitors may not be an essential function. Having someone else provide a direction is probably not going to fundamentally alter the security officer job. Let's see. Does the accommodation request seem reasonable? You all got this one correct, that yes, this does seem fairly reasonable. However, still need to engage in that interactive process. And the last part of the question: which alternatives do you feel are similar and going to still provide support for this employee? Well, this is not in all of the above, because reassigning essential job functions is typically not going to be reasonable. That is a fundamental alteration of duties, and you all got that one correct. No one selected that one. However, allowing the employee to use mobility aids and using additional staff to provide that break time coverage, those are likely going to be equally effective accommodations. So great work on those polls, everyone. All right, so to kind of wrap us up today, just wanted to share a little bit of extra resource information. So we have some links here, which are provided in the handout, for the ADA National Network, the U.S. Department of Labor, and the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So these can help you get some extra information when you're formulating those job descriptions and listing the job functions, determining which are essential and which could be marginal. However, you can always come and talk to our office as well. And you can contact us here. We've got our contact information that will come out to you in the slides. But for now, we want to open it up if anyone has any questions. I haven't seen that any have been submitted in the Q&A, but we'd like to offer anyone time to share with us any questions that they may have. Not seeing any come in quite yet. We'll go through the rest of our contact and resource information and still give you a little bit of time to type out your questions. So we also have the ability to request ongoing trainings or additional workshops, which you can do through our Accommodate database. You can also report any barriers to access that you find around our university community, whether they're inoperable door openers, cracked pavement, or if you find inaccessible software or websites. We do encourage individuals to voluntarily self-ID with their disability status, which they can do through Wolverine Access. This is a confidential place where you can provide this information, which helps give us a better understanding of the diversity of our organization. It's used to simply measure the university's commitment to accessibility and is never shared with your supervisor or anyone in your department. And we also have a lot more learning opportunities from our office, which you can check out on our website if you're looking for particular resources. You can also visit our YouTube channel, our Happening at Michigan event list, all of our pre-recorded presentations and trainings, and you can also sign up for our newsletter. So I still haven't seen any additional questions come in. So I think at this point, we can say to everyone, have a great afternoon, but please contact us if you have any questions about job descriptions, disability, accessibility, or inclusion. Thank you all.
Thank you.